The sum total of all the pleasures in the whole world is a mere drop when compared to the bliss of moksha. When all the desires are destroyed, the extinction of mind, where mind becomes no mind, is moksha. If the illusory I-ness or ego perishes, the end of thoughts to the Maya is moksha. Extinction of all psychological conditioning constitutes eternal liberation of the self. Self-knowledge is the realization that the self is in reality not bound, but always pure and free. Realize that you are the immortal, all-pervading self and become free. This is the goal of our life and the goal of our existence. There are 4 gatekeepers at the entrance to the realm of freedom. They are Shanti. I don't mean ahimsa. I'm telling something like self-control, or more appropriately, quietness of the mind, peace of mind, quietness of the mind. Vichara means the spirit of inquiry, Santosha, which means contentment, and Satsanga, which means good company. The wise seeker should diligently cultivate the friendship of these, or at least one of them. When the mind is at peace, pure, tranquil, free from delusion or hallucination, untangled and free from cravings, it does not long for anything, nor does it reject anything. This is Shanti, or conquest of mind. All that is good and auspicious flows from self-control. All evil is dispelled by self-control, that is quietness of the mind. No gain, no pleasure in this world or in heaven is compared to the delight of it. The delight one experiences in the presence of a person with a quiet mind is incomparable. Everyone spontaneously trusts him. None, not even the demons and goblins, hate him. Self-control is the best remedy for all physical and mental ills. When there is self-control, even the food you eat tastes better. The water you drink tastes better, else it tastes bitter. He who wears the armor of self-control is not harmed by sorrow. He who, even while hearing, touching, seeing, smelling, and tasting what is regarded as pleasant or unpleasant, is neither elated nor depressed. He is self-controlled. He who looks upon all beings with equal vision, having brought under control the sensations of pleasure and pain, is self-controlled. He who, though living amongst all, is unaffected by them, neither feels elated nor hates, even as one is during sleep. He is self-controlled. Enquiry, the next gatekeeper, should be undertaken by an intelligence that has been purified by a close study of the scripture, and this inquiry should be unbroken. By such inquiry, the intelligence becomes keen and is able to realize the Supreme. Hence, inquiry alone is the best remedy for long-lasting illness known as samsara, or repeated births. The wise man regards strength, intellect, efficiency, and timely action as the fruits of inquiry. Indeed, kingdom, prosperity, enjoyment, as well as final liberation are all the fruits of inquiry. The spirit of inquiry protects one from the calamities that befall an unthinking fool. When the mind has been rendered dull by the absence of inquiry, even the cool rays of the moon turn into deadly weapons, and the childish imagination throws up a goblin in every dark spot. Hence, the non-inquiring fool is really a storehouse of sorrow. It is the absence of inquiry that gives rise to actions that are harmful to oneself and to others, and to numerous psychosomatic illnesses. Therefore, one should avoid the company of such unthinking people. They in whom the spirit of inquiry is ever awake illumine the world, enlighten all who come in contact with them, dispel the ghosts created by an ignorant mind, and realize the falsity of sense pleasures and their objects. In the light of inquiry, there is realization of the eternal and unchanging reality. This is the supreme. With it, one does not long for any other gain, nor does one spurn anything. He is free from delusion, attachment. He is not inactive, nor does he get drowned in action. He lives and functions in this world, and at the end of a natural lifespan, he reaches a blissful state of total freedom. The eye of spiritual inquiry does not lose its sight even in the midst of all activities. He who does not have this eye is indeed to be pitied. It is better to be born as a frog in the mud, a worm in the dung, a snake in the hole, but not be one without this eye. What is inquiry? To inquire that, who am I? How was this evil of samsara, repetitive history, come into being? Is true inquiry. Knowledge of truth arises from such inquiry. From such knowledge there follows tranquility in oneself, and then there arises the supreme peace in the self and the ending of all sorrow. Contentment is another gatekeeper to liberation. He who has quaffed the nectar of contentment does not relish craving for sense pleasures. No delight in this world is as sweet as contentment, which destroys all sins. What is contentment? To renounce all craving for what is not obtained unsought, and to be satisfied with what comes unsought, without being elated or depressed even by them. This is contentment. As long as one is not satisfied in the self, he will be subjected to sorrow. With the rise of contentment, the purity of one's heart blooms. The contented man who possesses nothing owns the world. Satsanga, company of wise, holy and enlightened people, is yet another gatekeeper. Satsanga enlarges one's intelligence, destroys one's ignorance and one's psychological distress. Whatever be the cause, however difficult it may be, whatever obstacles may stand in its way, this should never be neglected. For Satsanga alone is one's light on the path of life. Satsang is indeed superior to all other forms of religious practices like charity, austerity, pilgrimages, and the performance of religious rites. I don't mean to tell about the satsang organized by ashrams. It is of course very difficult to find people who are enlightened in today's world, because religion and spiritual status has become a mere symbolic appearance. We judge by the appearance and their looks. So look for a person who is enlightened, or a person who knows the path. That alone can save you. One should by every means in one's power adore and serve the holy men who have realized the truth and in whose heart the darkness of ignorance has been dispelled. They who, on the other hand, treat such holy men disrespectfully surely invite great suffering. These four, contentment, satsanga, spirit of inquiry, and self-control, are the four surest means by which they who are drowning in this ocean of samsara can be saved. Contentment is the supreme gain. Satsanga is the best companion to the destination. The spirit of inquiry itself is the greatest wisdom. And self-control is supreme happiness. If you are unable to resolve to all these four, then practice one. By the diligent practice of one of these, the others will also be found in you. The highest wisdom will seek you of its own accord. Until you tame the wild elephant of your mind with the help of these noble qualities, you cannot have progress towards the supreme, even if you become a god, demigod, or a tree. Without self-inquiry and the consequent inner tranquility, neither devotion to Lord nor self-knowledge is possible. Hence, resort to self-inquiry and the practice of the end to distraction, and thus adore the self. If you are successful in this, you have attained perfection. If not, you are no more than a wild donkey. Lord, in fact, dwells as the innermost being of all. They are surely the worst among men who, abandoning the indweller, seek God outside. Who are you? Who am I? I'll tell you a child's response to this. An excellent response. I am neither man, God, Yaksha, Brahmin, Vaishya, Shudra, Brahmachari, householder, forest dweller, nor sannyasi, but I am pure awareness alone. Just as the sun causes all worldly movements, so do I, the ever-present, self-conscious cause of mind, to be active and the senses to function. Again, just as the ether is all-pervading, yet devoid of any specific qualities, so am I free from all qualities. I am the conscious self, ever present and associated with everything in the same manner as heat is always associated with fire. I am that eternal, undifferentiated, unshaken consciousness on account of which the insentient mind and senses function, each in its own manner. I am that conscious self of whom ego is not independent, as the image in a mirror is not independent of the object related. I am the unqualified conscious self, existing even after the extinction of intellect, just as the object remains ever the same even after removal of the reflecting mirror. I am eternal consciousness, dissociated from the mind and senses. I am the mind of the mind, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, and so on. I am not cognizable by the mind and senses. I am the eternal single conscious self, reflected in various intellects, just as the sun is reflected on the surface of various sheets of water. I am the single conscious self illuminating all intellects, just as the sun simultaneously illuminates all eyes so that they perceive objects. Only those eyes that are held by the sun are capable of seeing objects, not others. The source from which the sun derives its power is myself. Just as the reflection of the sun on agitated water seems to break up but remains perfect on a calm surface, so also am I, the conscious self, unrecognizable in agitated intellects, though I clearly shine in those which are calm. Just as a fool thinks that the sun is entirely lost when it is hidden by dense clouds, so do people think that the ever-free self is bound. Just as the ether is all-pervading and unaffected by contact, so also does the ever-conscious self pervade everything without being affected in any way. I am that self. Just as a transparent crystal takes on the lines of its background but is in no way changed thereby, and just as the unchanging moon, on being reflected on undulating surfaces, appears agitated, so is it with me, so is it with you, the all-pervading God. As this reveals the self as clearly as a gooseberry, it's called amlaka, and a gooseberry held in the fist of a child. The fist is called hasta. The child who recited this became a popular person and got praised by everybody and was called Hastamlaka. The mind pictures the world as if it is real, trying to find out means which will relieve me from the pains of repeated births. This thought consumes me like a wildfire. What is wealth? Wealth cannot give happiness. It is a source of misery. It is temporary and unsteady. It moves from one to another. It makes people evil by tempting them to commit sin. It hardens the heart of men. It destroys all our good qualities and gets us caught in a trap of desires. The fire of desires has burnt us. Body, The body is composed of flesh, bones, fat, nerves, tendons, and blood. It is a home to various diseases and is filled with impurities. Ego lives in this body as the master, with greed as the mistress. It is being bitten by the serpent of ever increasing desires of the five senses. People without this knowledge begin to droop in their minds and thus shorten their lives. I do not rejoice in this life of mine which darts like a flash of lightning in the cloud of delusion and ignorance. The body is like a bubble that will burst at any time. The shining skin is subject to wrinkles in old age. There is nothing so hurtful as this life which is perishable and temporary in nature. Ego. I am much afraid of this ego which generates actions, desires, pains, and is the source of all evil. Ego is illusory and deludes people. Ego is nothing but is everything for the worldly people. Ego is born of ignorance. Pride nurtures it. There is no enemy greater than ego. Ego has its seat in the mind. Ego makes man commit evil and wrong actions. Ego is a disease. Pride, lust, anger, delusion, greed, jealousy, love, hate are the servants of ego. Therefore, the real secret lies only in the renunciation of this ego. Mind. Mind arises only through ego. Mind is tossed about in objects of love and hatred like a storm. It ever whirls far and wide in vain, in sensual objects, away from the association with the wise like a strolling dog. But no results accrue therefrom. This baneful mind does not hold the joy or enjoy the happiness within, but whirls at the sight of the superficial outward appearances. This ferocious dog of mind follows its desires and preys upon ignorant. This monster of a mind is more terrible than fire itself, more insurmountable than mountains, and more obdurate than a huge diamond. All pains are generated by mind. If this mind is annihilated through discrimination of spiritual inquiry, all pains and the illusory world will vanish. Desires. Desire is the enemy of people. Desire is the enemy of peace. The pack of owls called passion and anger play in the ether of consciousness during the night of restless desires. Enveloped with the intense gloom of dire delusion, being without a mind of Atma knowledge, I am enmeshed by them, like a bird caught in a trap, and droop thereby. The fire of desires has burnt us. The desire follows people in hope of inciting them to earn wealth, but in vain. Like a dancing woman, who, though enfeebled by age, dances in vain without true joy, my desires play in me in a similar manner and afflict me. They will try to encompass things beyond their reach, but even if such things are within their grasp, they will pass over and again long for happiness in other things. Like monkeys, they roam about without any fixed seat. This body, which is composed of the cool intestines, muscles, and is subject to changes, being at one time fat and at another time lean, shines in this mundane existence simply to undergo pains. What more palpable fruits, pains-giving, and degraded thing could be conceived of than this body, which oscillates with pains or pleasures through the increase or decrease of the experiences of objects. Infancy. The child is in a helpless condition. He cannot convey his ideas. He weeps for nothing. He is ignorant. This period is ever attended with dangers of fire, water, etc. He is easily irritable. How can the ignorant child be said to be happy? Youth. At this period, the young man is a slave to lust. His mind is filled with evil thoughts. He commits various sins. His good qualities vanish. The period of youth passes away quickly. The foolish man who rejoices in his temporary youth is no more than a human beast. Lust. What beauty is there in a woman who is composed of flesh, bones, fat, nerves, tendons, and blood? A woman is charming for a short while. She is the cause of delusion. Where is the beauty in an age-old woman with wrinkled skin? Women destroy the life of men by causing lust and clouding the power of discrimination. I long only to attain that state of supreme bliss which will put an end to repeated births. Old age drives away the beauty of people. The old man is treated with contempt by his family members. He is helpless and his senses are powerless. He cannot satisfy his desires. He has no good memory. He suffers from various diseases. There is an insatiable desire for enjoyments, but he has no capacity to enjoy. What is the good of this miserable routine life subjected to decay and old age? Time. Time is the raid that cuts off the thread of life in the universe. There is nothing in this world that will be spared by time. The king called death, with the armies of mental and physical diseases, march in procession in this world. What bliss can we expect to derive from association with this, the old grey hag of dire dotage? It is very difficult to do away with the desires of old age by getting rid of the three kinds of desires: the son, wife, and wealth. All the pleasurable objects of enjoyment in this world, arising through ignorance in the series of rebirths, take leave with the arrival of death or time. Like a thread nibbled by a rat, there is nothing in this world which is not devoured by time. What is the good of this miserable mundane life which is subject to decay and old age? In enjoyment, there is fear of disease. In social position, the fear of falling off. In wealth, the fear of hostile governments. In honor, the fear of humiliation. In power, the fear of enemies. In beauty, the fear of old age. In scriptural erudition, the fear of opponents. In virtue, the fear of traducers. In body, the fear of death. All the things of this world pertaining to human beings are attended with fear. Renunciation alone stands for fearlessness. The story of mind. The mind manifests itself as the external world in the shape of pains or pleasures. The mind subjectively is consciousness, while objectively it is the universe. All persons have two bodies, a subtle one to the mind and a gross one. The mind performs all actions very speedily in this mental body and thereby fluctuates. But the gross body knows nothing about it and is inert. What is the nature of this inert and formless body of the mind? The form which is of the Supreme Self, of the infinite consciousness, assumes this shape of mind through determination. All conceptions associated with actions arising out of that real state which is intermediate, powerful, Sat and Asat, are on either sides of it. and all are nothing but the forms of the mind. No matter where that mind proceeds or what form it manifests itself with, if it is made to tread the path leading to moksha or to merge into Paramatma, the Supreme Self, then it will be conducive to its progress. Listen to a story told by Brahma. There was a great forest of dire delusion and replete with dire pains. A fractional part of its uppermost limit measured many trillions of miles. In that forest lived a Purusha, a person, with infinite eyes and hands. He had a mind which roamed everywhere. He had the form of ether. He would lash himself, and with self-inflicted pains, he would yell, and then he would run in all directions without having any mastery over himself, dashing himself against all objects in intense gloom. He would precipitate himself down the deep and desolate well of terrific sins, and there would be eking out a life of misery. Then, emerging out of that well, he would, as before, lash his body and scream out and keep running as before. In his haste, he would entangle himself in a forest of trees, and with wounds all over the body, would flutter like a moth in a flame. Then, running to a beautiful garden, he would run to the other extreme of intense exaltation. Again and again, he would recur, running to a beautiful garden and coming back to the well. He recurs from the pleasurable garden to the previous thorny forest, and then into the well and back again, finding pleasure in none. Saying this reel thus giddily many times, Brahma caught him under his grip to free him from all fears and questioned him thus: "Who are you? Why are you hurting yourself and groaning under pains? What are you doing here? And what is your intention?" To which that person replied thus: "All persons having the concept of I are non-existent to me. I have not been able to find any actions for me to perform in this world. I am quite pained by the heterogeneous differentiations set up by you. You are my enemy. It is only through you that I have identified myself with the pains and pleasures I have been suffering from." Having said so, he looked at his body. His heart began to melt, and he cried aloud. He again looked with his eyes over his beautiful form and laughed aloud for a long time. Then, in my very presence, he freed himself from the many fat bodies he had assumed in many previous births. Through the force of dire destiny, another person was born in another spot. Like the former person, he appeared before us in a plight similar to the other and hurt himself. When I consoled him as previously, then this person passed along his path and gave up that body. Again did he not come he did not come back for a long time. When he did, he came in another guise, and in this life he fell into that deep unfrequented well. We did not see him emerge out of that well for a long time. Then there appeared on the stage of this ever perturbed forest this person as another, who, though he was clearly greatly checked in his path and shown the road to true knowledge by us, spurned our advice and still persisted in his obstinate course of lashing himself as he went along. Even now do such ferocious people exist, suffering under great pains and dwelling in such dire forests, replete with sharp-pointed thorns and enveloped in such a thick gloom as to instill fear into all hearts. But wise men, even should they live in the midst of a fiery burnt-up forest, will regale and rejoice in it, as in a cool flower garden, wafting sweet odors." What is the underlying meaning of this story? The infinite forest referred to in the story is nothing but this samsara, repeated births, which is without a beginning, middle, or end. It is associated with Maya, or is illusory, and is lofty, dire, and replete with excessive illusions. The person residing in the forest of the universe, filled with the vapor of fiery air, stands for the mind whirling with pains. He who checked the impetuous passage of the mind represents the incomparable discrimination. The mind attained through its enemy of discrimination the quiescent state of Parabrahma, the infinite consciousness. The mind at first turned its back upon discrimination and hence entangled itself in the folds of vasanas of objects. The well into which the egos sink after hurting their bodies is hell. The plantain garden symbolizes heaven, which is full of enjoyments. The forest of trees abounding with thorns is the earth filled with beings of extreme desires. Then the person who fell into the well and was unable to rise from it for a long time and entered a different city by rebirth stands for the mind not yet freed from its sins. The long pointed thorns represent the males and females of this world full of desires. The words "you are my enemy" in the mind, with which the ego self has identified its pains and pleasures, I have been suffering from, are the outbursts of the mind in its last gasp of death through discrimination. The cry set up is when the desires are sought to be annihilated. The calling for help through the pains represents the mind with half-developed self-knowledge when it starts letting go desires. The final cool joy and the laugh consequent upon it is the bliss arising from the mind merging into the stainless self-knowledge, jnana. And the real bliss is that one which arises when the mind, becoming desireless through self-knowledge, destroys its subtle form. The bridling of the mind, overpowering, refers to the concentration of the same through initiation into self-knowledge. The scourging of the body refers to the pains created through the excessive misconceptions of the mind. The person over a vast field represents roaming the world, unconscious of the reality. Only through the mastery of the perishable vasanas which a man generates can he free himself from bondage. All become subject to bondage through their own sankalpas and vasanas, like a silkworm in its cocoon. Having delved into your mind through the stainless mind has thoroughly sifted it, you may destroy your stainful mind. The infinite consciousness manifests itself as the many. Out of the infinite potencies in it arises at one time one potency. This, they appear in different forms like plants, animals, humans, etc. The knowledge, jnana shakti, of the stainless Brahman manifests itself as the many. Brahman manifests in these perishable bodies. On this earth, at a certain time, space, it is only the Brahmic reality that is always and everywhere. It is only the Brahman which manifests itself as mind through determination, or as an individual gets into bondage, or as the emancipated Paramatma, Supreme Soul, as well as the universe and the many energies in it. The world seems to be real to ignorant men, just like a small child believes everything his mother said is true. Listen to this story of the mind's illusions. A certain small, ignorant child prayed to his mother to tell a tale for his diversion. She told the following story. Once upon a time, three princes of bravery and good qualities resided in an empty city. Of these three, two were never born, and the third never went into any womb to be generated. These princes rested in the forest of sky which has no trees. They plucked countless fruits, and having satisfied their keen hunger by feeding themselves upon the delicious fruits therein, went on their way up. There they witnessed three rivers with dashing waves, winding their way on the outskirts of that forest. Of these three rivers, two had no water in them, while the third is filled with dry white sands. In the last river they bathed and drank its waters. At sunset they retired to a non-existent town, and there they built three houses. Of these three houses, two did not exist at all. The third one built a huge palace without any materials. The three princes went to reside in these three houses without any walls. These three people who lived in the three buildings in an invisible town in the sky cooked rice equal to 6 measures minus 10 measures and cooked the same. Having done so, they gave their food out to countless people. After the people had thus filled their stomach, the princes ate the remaining meal as a godsend. Then, delighting themselves with hunting and other such pursuits, they spent their time most joyfully there. When the mother thus concluded her story, her innocent child rested in the profound belief of the geniusness of the mother's tale. Similarly do the ignorant conceive and observe this world to be really existence. The expansion of this mind alone is sankalpa, determination, and sankalpa through its power of differentiation generates this universe. Therefore, may you divest yourself of all sankalpas and be a nirvikalpa. Enter nirvikalpa samadhi. So we know that we have to stop the mind. How do we stop the mind? When you want to stop the mind, you start thinking about stopping the mind doesn't stop. So it is an endless cycle. So there is no way in which you can think and stop the mind. There's a physical trigger to it. This is considered as the most important point by all the sages and enlightened people. I'll tell you the physical trigger. There are 112 physical triggers I know of. I'll just tell you one of them, the most important one, I think. Observe the merger between pana and apana, the breath that goes in and the breath that comes out. How did that transformation happen? Where is it happening? Observe. Don't think, just observe. Try to watch it. And the breath that goes out is again coming in. Where is that merger happening? If you just keep observing, then your thoughts will subside, and naturally after some time your mind is thoughtless. And a thoughtless mind, when used again, has a higher intelligence. When you do this repeatedly, you are entering nirvikalpa. You are entering samadhi. You are entering a stage of enlightenment. So Buddha did just this. What he actually did was to observe. So that is how you free yourself from the miseries caused by the mind, experienced because of the ego self. So once you do this practice, physical practice, you will see that your senses become sharper. You hear to sounds from farther away. Your sight becomes better. And you are absolutely peaceful. And you realize that I am nothing but pure Awareness alone. Awareness. 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 Thank you.